This video will review concepts from coordinate geometry in preparation for the Keystone Algebra 1 exam. If we look at this quick concept review, we have a couple different forms of a linear equation. You could see a linear equation in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. Typically, we use this when we have the slope and we have the y-intercept. The next form of a linear equation that you could potentially see is the point-slope form. And the point-slope form takes a point and a slope and puts it into an equation. So we use this typically when we have the slope and we're given a point. So the names tell us when it's best to use which form of a line. If we have the slope and the y-intercept, we want to use slope-intercept form. When we have a point and a slope, let's use point-slope form. Then on the Keystone Algebra 1 exam, if you are given something in point-slope form and it is a constructed response, we will need to solve for y and simplify and put it into slope-intercept form. So there is a way that we can simplify this down to slope-intercept form. Then we have standard form. Standard form is typically given to you, but you'll see it, and it is ax plus by equals c. And just like point-slope form, typically we have to take this form and we have to rewrite it as slope-intercept form. So a lot of times we have to go back to that first slope-intercept form anyways. But if we have standard form, it helps us find the x-intercept and the y-intercept pretty easily. So now let's go through some graphing. We are going to graph this equation, and if we look at this equation and we compare it to the forms on the original slide, we have y is equal to mx plus b. So this is slope-intercept form. So we can graph using slope-intercept form. You can graph with your calculator, but if we graph by hand, we could look at it as y is equal to 2x plus -5. So m is equal to 2, and that is our slope. A lot of times we will make the slope a fraction. So if you have a whole number like we do here, we can put 2 over 1. And then b, which is the y-intercept, is -5. So to graph with this form, we can take this -5 and we're going to start there. So on the y-axis, we're going to count down to -5. So count down to where we have -5 and make a point. Then we're going to use the slope to move to get our second point. If it is positive, we're going to move up 2 into the right 1. So we'll move up 2 to the right 1, up 2 to the right 1. You could also move down 2 to the left 1. And what happens there is you are taking -2 because we're going down 2, and then to the left one is -1. But remember that a negative divided by a negative gives us a positive. So we will graph and connect these dots, and now we have a line. So now let's go through another graph. This graph is a linear equation, and it is in the form of ax plus by is equal to c. So if we think back to that first slide, this is in standard form. And standard form helps us find the x and y intercepts. So we're going to graph this using the x and y intercepts. To get the x-intercept, we are going to replace y with 0. So we're going to have 3x minus 5 times 0 is equal to 15. I typically put, anytime I sub in numbers, I put a parentheses around the number to remind me that we are replacing that variable with a number. So if we look at this, we have 3x. We don't necessarily need the parentheses there, so we can subtract those out. We'll just have 3x and then minus 5 times 0. Because there's no symbol in between 5 and 0, and there's just a parentheses, that does mean it's multiplication. So we'll have minus 0 here is equal to 15. That gives us 3x is equal to 15. If we take 3x equal to 15, to get x by itself, we can divide both sides by 3. Dividing both sides by 3 cancels out these 3's, and we get x is equal to 5. So that is a point. We now have the point 5, 0. So we're going to graph 5, 0. We're going to go to the right 5 and plot that point. And then we are going to figure out the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is similar, but instead of replacing y with 0, we're going to replace x with 0. So replace x with 0, and we get 3 times 0 minus 5y is equal to 15. 3 times 0 gives us 0. So we no longer need this. But that negative in front of the 5, that stays. So we have negative 5y is equal to 15. Do the same thing. We're going to divide by negative 5 on both sides to get y by itself. So y equals negative 3. And that is a positive divided by a negative, so that gives us a negative number. And it gives us a point, 0, negative 3. So we count down on the y-axis to negative 3, and now we have 2 points. In order to graph a line, we need at least 2 points, which we have here. So we have a line connecting those 2 dots. So now let's go through some multiple choice problems. If we look at this, we have a function of x is graphed on the coordinate plane below. And we have a graph here. Which equation describes the function? If we look at all our answers here, which is always a good idea on multiple choice, we have all of these in slope-intercept form. So for slope-intercept form, if you think of the name, we need the slope and we need the y-intercept. So looking at this graph, we can figure out what the slope is by finding the rise and the run over across a set of points. So let's first find, before we find slope, we can find the y-intercept. The y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis. So the line crosses the y-axis right there, right where I made that blue dot. And that is at the point 0, negative 4. So that means if we compare it to the form, the slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, that means b is equal to negative 4. So now let's take the point and find another point on the line. And we're going to try to find where it crosses right at the corner of a box. And right at the corner of the box is 3, -2. So we can find that other point. We can use the slope formula. Here's the slope formula. Y sub 2 minus y1 over x sub 2 minus x1. Or we could count, and that would probably be the quickest way, is to count. And we always count up or down first. And to get to the second point, we're going to go up 2 and to the right 3. So our slope is a +2 and a +3 because we're going up and to the right. If we were to go left or if we were to go down, that would result in a negative portion of the slope. So slope is equal to m. So we are finding something that if we replace those in, we have 2/3 x plus -4. If we look at all our options here, we do not need the plus negative. We could simplify that a little bit further so that it's 2/3 x minus 4. And that is option A. So our answer is letter A here. Let's go through another multiple choice problem. Carl starts biking at some distance from his house and rides his bike away from his house. The graph below states the relationship between the amount of time Carl rides and his distance from his house. What distance in miles is Carl from his house when he starts biking? So if we look at this, when he starts biking, the time is 0. So we just need to know what is this point when t is equal to 0. And the distance when time is equal to 0, that is 0.25. So realistically, what they were looking for there was the y-intercept, and we found that. If we look at this multiple choice problem, we have a scatter plot that shows the cost, y in dollars, and of orange trees based on their ages. So x in terms of years. So based on the scatter plot, which equation represents the line of best fit for the cost of the orange trees? So looking at these two, we do want to draw a line of best fit. And if we look at the line of best fit, we want approximately the same amount of points above the line as there are below the line. And hopefully we get a decent amount of points on the line. So if we draw this, all right, we have approximately that line of best fit. And if we look at our line of best fit, the y-intercept is real close to 30. So we do have a y-intercept, which means that C and A are out because we want something with a y-intercept. And remember, the y-intercept is the B term. So if we look at this and we see some number, y-intercept, close to 30, we could pick that option, but we want to double check and we want to make sure that we are correct. So we can double check by using the slope and figuring out, is it 11.8 or is it 15.7? To find the slope, we're going to use 2 points on the line. So my 2 points are 140 and 110. And remember that slope is y sub 2 minus y1 over x sub 2 minus x1. We can label our points x1, y1, x2, y2, and come up with the slope. So now we're just subbing in y2 is 110, y1 is 40, x2 is 7, x1 is 1. Simplifying that down, we get approximately 11.7. So that means that our answer is 11.8 x plus 29.2. So now our last multiple choice problem for this video. We have the scatter plot below shows the relationship between the time in minutes and the distance in miles that Julie walked on several different occasions. Based on the line of best fit, and this time they already graphed it for you, which is the most likely number of miles Julie would walk in 105 minutes. For this one, we can extend this line of best fit. We're going to extend it as straight as possible so that it's over top of what we potentially may have at 105. And looking at this and looking at our options, we know that 105 minutes, she's already passed 4 miles. She's also already passed 5. She's passed 6. And if we look at that, the next number we have there is 7. So at 105 minutes, Julie would have walked 7 miles. And that is the last problem for this video. Make sure that you're still reviewing some Keystone Algebra problems as much as possible prior to the exam.